and the Mythical Society people for giving me this opportunity here. And this particular work that I am going to present, this is a study of ceramics from Gujarat. And the ceramics were belonging to the Indus Valley period of Gujarat. Now, the issue is that overall there is a kind of agreement among the scholars that there is a lot of homogeneity in technology in the Indus Valley period. If you look at the Indus Valley period sites, the distribution of Indus Valley period sites, it is something around more than 1.4 million square kilometer area. Its northernmost boundary is Shotagai in Afghanistan, and southernmost boundary is somewhere in Baroda river, that is Damabad. Then Supajandor on the western part of Pakistan, that is on the Makran coast, and Alamgirpur or Kulas, whichever comes the easternmost on the Ganga Valley. So overall it covers 1.4 million square kilometers, which is much bigger than the present-day Pakistan. So it is not possible to accept the fact that there is homogeneity in technology. That is one of the challenges that I wanted to take up. Second thing, what do you mean by technology? Majority of the people who have been working on technology, they were speaking about manufacturing process or different stages of production. That was it. But technology doesn't mean that. Technology means much more than that. Like all the organizational aspects will come, right from the procurement of the raw material, the processing, the knowledge, the cognitive elements, and the social need, and the need of the society outside of it. All these things would come. But these things cannot be that easily understood in the Indus Valley context, as we do not have any kind of living examples. Basically, this is a problem, one of the major issues that we face when we are taking up archaeological studies like this. To bring out these kind of theoretical perspectives, you need to have data. That data becomes quite difficult. So here I'm trying to attempt it from a very different angle. What I'm doing is that I'm using certain scientific methods of analysis. I'm using microscopic methods, using simple polarizing microscopy. Then I'm using chemical analysis methods like energy dispersive X-ray analysis. Then I'm looking at the standing electron micrographs and trying to see what exactly is the relationship between two sets of ceramics through the process of characterization. So that is just the background of it. So here you might find a bit fanciful title, that is the handicraft style and the industrial side. So there was a coexistence of these two styles during the Indus Valley period. That is what I am going to show you now. So which means that technology there was no that kind of homogeneity, there were heterogeneity in between. The first and foremost problem about Indus civilization is that each of its excavators are given at different names. So if you if you try to go through the literature, the main terminologies are Indo-Sumerian civilization. That is the first one which John Marshall came up with, because he found some artifact that resembled the Sumerians. Indo-Sumerian civilization, because they found some objects which are similar to that of the Mesopotamian material. So he tended to call it as Indo-Sumerian. And then there was another kind of debate. Since it is on the Indus River, we should call it as an Indus civilization. Then Harappa was one of those type sites. Harappa was excavated, and the type site was considered as Harappa. And almost all sites which were excavated around that, their materials were compared with that of the Harappa to give a relative chronology. So that was called as Harappan culture. Then, since it belonged to, there were a large number of sites on both the sides of Indus River, and the concept of valley comes in, and it becomes Indus Valley civilization. And the Germans decided to have an entirely different name for it. they called it as Proto-Indian civilization because they thought that it is sensible to consider the Indus civilization as the base of the Indian civilization. And then Indus age is another term that has been used by some of the excavators. But during the 70s and the 80s, there was extensive explorations on the Hakra River, which flows through Chorasan Desert in Pakistan, and also the Gaggar River. The Gaggar River, once it gets to Pakistan, it becomes so. That is the Sakra, which is on the Chorasan Desert, and also the Gaggar on the Indian side. So the Gaggar extends to Chorasan Desert, and it becomes Hakra there. A large number of sites were reported from the Hakra, bank of Hakra, and also from the Gaggar River. So the ancient name of this river is Saraswati. So it was thought that we should call it as Indus-Saraswati civilization. I think it is a more sensible term because the number of sites on Saraswati is almost 1.5 times higher than that of the Indus. So the lot of settlements have been here in this region. Now, there also has been subdivisions about how did this civilization come into existence. There are certain, the previous phases of it. So some people tended to call it as pre-Harappan, some people called it as Proto-Harappan, early Harappan, mature Harappan. Till there I will stop. Now, pre-Harappan means the thing that is prior to Harappan, which is completely cut off from the Harappan. But when you say early Harappan, you see the elements of development of the Indus civilization that one. So that is, there is a meaning that early Harappan. But both the terms are used without any kind of, the archaeologists tend to use both the terms very often. Then Proto-Harappan is okay, going towards Harappan, that is it. Then mature Harappan, that is the classical stage. Late Harappan is the late stage. That is one way of looking at it. Some people have the tendency of seeing it as from the point of view of the urbanization. So they call it as pre-urban, urban, then early, intermediate, late Indus and its subphases. Like that, some people have. So pre-urban, urban, and late urban or post-urban. Then this kind of complicated terms. Then also some people who thought that Indus is Sindh, so it should be called as Sindhi River. Then Kuli had some elements of Harappan, but had some distinction. So they said it as Kuli Harappan. Sorat, that is Gujarat, it also had some distinctive types of materials. It is not fully agreeing with the Harappan material. So Sorat Harappan, if you read Subbarau's Personality of India, he mentions it as Kathiawar Harappans. Then Punjabi Harappan, Eastern Labrador. So we have large amount of terminologies, and these terminologies keep confusing the students of archaeology and also the researchers in archaeology. So to overcome that, there was one attempt that was done in the late 70s and early 80s. Two archaeologists, that is Schaffer and Lissestedt, they tried to look at the radiocarbon dates of those sites which are Harappan, early Harappan, pre-Harappan, whatever the names that you have assigned. And they tried to see what exactly is the relationship between terms of chronology and terms of number of years and all. And they found that there is some kind of contemporaneity in many of the cases, and at the same time there are some differences. So they proposed a hypothesis saying that during that particular period, that is a 4th millennium BC, the Indus Valley region had several ethnic groups living there who interacted among themselves, but at the same time they kept their identity to themselves, which was a very much acceptable thing because you have ethnicity varying from different places to different places. Ethnicity is basically the adaptation of a community to a particular kind of environmental setting. So language is there, it is many things, food habits, all those things form a part of the ethnicity. So what they did is that they tried to work out a model which is a processual model, that is how the a civilization emerges out. So the first early food producing era, followed by regionalization era, then followed by integration era, followed by localization. So all these things Actually, you have the early food producing era, which is the ceramic phase and pre-ceramic phase of Maharaja. Then you have the regionalization era of the Maharaja 2A and 2B. Then you have Ravi, you have Hakra, then Balakot, Kodiji, Amriyali, Harappan, that is the integration, the classical Harappan. Then there is a change. Then you have the early republics and Mauryan Empire. When it goes here, the early republics, again, it becomes a regionalization era. Then you have the Mauryan Empire followed by a localization era. Then there is regionalization, then integration, localization. Like that, the history keeps on happening. So it is a kind of processual model that has been worked out, and people are Schaffer and Lichtenstein. Mark Canoe has plotted it beautifully, so I took it from there. So now if you look at it, this is how the number of Harappan sites. These are the major Harappan cities, that the blue ones are the major Harappan cities. Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Ganbariwala, and then Dholavira and Lakhigarhi here. These are all the major, that is the largest settlements. And the other is these Raddu ones, they are all excavated ones. So except the one is Ganbariwala, the remaining major Harappan settlements have been excavated. And it is believed that Ganbariwala is probably the largest one. Currently, we have Mohenjo-daro. Lakhigarhi is also equally big, but Ganbariwala, unless we do explorations and excavations there, then only we will come to know about it. But it is not a very friendly area to go in. Even for Pakistani archaeologists, they are finding it very difficult to go there. So this is the overall area. So it is not very easy to imagine a kind of homogeneity in many things here. Then it comes to the Gujarat. I'm going to tell you about the ceramics from Gujarat. You have divisions actually. Kutch is one of this, North Gujarat or Anarth region, and Saurashtra or the Kathiawar region or the Sorat region. And this region is known as the Lat region, that is South Gujarat and the Central Gujarat alluvium. So these are all the excavated sites. And actually in Gujarat, large number of excavations have happened. And you can see these are all those red triangles are the ones which are the excavated Harappan sites. Now I'm going to do a case study to verify the kind of proposal that I had, that Indus ceramic technology is not that homogeneous. When Dr. Asarao was excavating Rangpur and Dothral, he came across a ceramics called micaceous redware. And initially he ignored it. He put it as a very fine redware, and he put it along with the redware pottery. Then later he noticed that there is some difference, and he found dusting on it, some mica dusting on it. So he thought that the mica content is fairly high in that one. It is second remote, if you read, because it's very interesting, because when you the Lothal discovery and excavation and its interview were published in different newspapers and also in some of those letters which he had written. So his thought process and all those things, I had an opportunity to read it. That is why I'm saying. Then the third time he looked at it and he found that the surface of this ceramic is slightly undulatory. Whereas in many of those cases of the Harappan ceramics, it is not undulatory. It is very even, but here it was undulatory. So the fourth thing that he noticed was it had a burnishing. It's not necessarily that all Harappan ceramics had burnishing. So this was the fourth distinction that he found. I cannot say that he found all those things, but slowly and certainly later people were looking at it. And also there are another difference is that when you look at the paintings on it, the paintings are not straight lines. They are smooth, but then some places you can see the paints dripping down. Now its distribution, if you see, it is there from Lothal, Rangpur, Desalpur, Kanewal, then Ratanpura, then Wagat, Rojdi, Nageshwar, and then Nilka River. Nilka is a small river which runs for about 75 kilometers in Gujarat. And I explored that area and I found about 9 sites there, Harappan period sites, and 7 sites had extremely high quantity of micaceous redware. We wanted to excavate one of the sites, but unfortunately before we could reach here, The site was already destroyed by many other kind of human activity. These are all the kind of forms that is available. That is bowl, dish, basin, jar, lamp, bottle, tishons, and these are all. So in Gujarat, its concentration is on the Pal region. In Pakistan, it is there. These are all the areas in Pakistan. In UAE, it is also there. So it has a very interesting kind of distribution. Now, this is its distribution in Gujarat, actually. These are all desert port. So this is the area where it is found. Now, before I get into it, there is something else that I want to tell. When India was partitioned, 47, almost all the Harappan sites went into Pakistan. So we were completely upset that we lost the Harappan civilization. India lost its roots. That is what Mortimer Wheeler said. Wheeler, in his presidential speech in 1948, when he was addressing the Indian Finance Congress, he made a statement saying that India, with the partition of India, we lost its roots to Pakistan, but its weight is still there in the Ganga Valley. So this was something which made the archaeologists upset about it, because we lost our roots to Pakistan. Of course, Pakistan, India, and all those things are recent creations, which we never thought about it at that time. So A. Ghosh, who became the Director General, he had an idea. He thought that there is a possibility that you may have some Harappan sites still within the Indian territory. So he ordered for an exploration on the northwestern frontier states of India. That time the northwestern frontier states were Kashmir, then Punjab, Haryana was not formed, Rajasthan and Gujarat. So there was a continuous exploration on that region. So that exploration brought out a lot of Harappan sites. At the same time, it also played some kind of some mischievous tricks there. Because what exactly is a Harappan site, or what makes a site Harappan, that was something which we could not define at that time. So in A. Ghosh's report, many of the sites came, maybe one or two potsherds would make a site Harappan. So there was a Harappanization process going on. And in this process, what happened is that there were several regional Chalcolithic cultures. For example, the Benas Chalcolithic culture, then the regional Chalcolithic cultures of Gujarat. All of them were left unnoticed, because this Harappanization process was some of those bad things that happened. So this is something which I just said in the previous slide. This is a description of the pottery, that it has a very thick and glossy slip. And this is the painting. You can see it is not very even. And its color is pink to red. And generally, it is burnished. It has tiny mica things, and it doesn't have any striation marks. It is believed that wheel-made pottery have parallel striations and all this. So that is how it is taught in the classrooms. But I think it is not correct, because no pottery is made by one technique. It is made by multiple techniques, actually. So then there are subdued to marks of shining, then surface finish is superior. These are all the kind of features. Now, this particular ceramic, initially they put it as a category of, within the category of Harappan. They said that it is a Harappan ceramic. Okay, no problem with us. Let us examine it. Then, when you look at it further, this is how it is. So good range of decorations are where this is a kind of decorations that you see. You have these wavy lines, you have these horizontal bands, and there are also certain complex painted ones. And this is something, this is stud handle, which is considered, this was once declared as the time fossil of Harappans of Saurashtra. That is how it was declared. And then horizontal bands and black paintings. And they also said that it is magnetiferous ore or magnetiferous earth. It is that giving this color. These are the forms. There are about 11 shapes for it. One thing that we must notice is that unlike any other vessel, all these vessels have a round base. It has a round base. So, which means there is only one category of vessel which has a flat base. All the rest of these vessels are a round base. So, you need a stand to keep these vessels. Otherwise, it will not stand steady. Second thing is that it is not wheel made. It is handmade, or it is made on a mold. So that is the second difference. which is not, which is a handicraft style, which is not an industrial style. Thirdly, the kind of paintings that you see, these paintings have, the lines are not steady and its thickness is varying. If you are making a horizontal line by keeping the vessel on the wheel, and if you move it, it will give you very straight, uniformly thick kind of line. Whereas here it is not like that. And the kind of designs that you find there, they are also different from the typical Harappan designs. In fact, people generally look at the beauty of the Harappan pottery and people tend to appreciate it by seeing the paintings on it. But very less number of Harappan pottery, it is painted. Painting or this decoration of a pottery is a technique that is used by the potters to avoid the monotony and also to cover the imperfections in manufacturing. Many of this painted pottery, if you see, the paintings are executed in such areas where there will be some kind of imperfections. So the distribution of Michael's Reddiver, if you look at it in time and space, 2550 to 2300 BC it is there, then 2300 to 2000 BC, then 2000 to 1800 BC, 1800 to 1600 BC. So this is the Gujarat region, Lothal, Leh, Rangpur and all those things, Rangpur 2A, but it continues in Rangpur 2B also, that is here and Lothal B. So the tradition does not die out. Although it has a distinct personality, it continues, it survives the Harappan period. The difference, basic difference between the Michael's Reddiver and the other associated ways, surface treatment is different. There is a difference in the executing the paintings. The clay paste preparation technique is different, that I will come to that later. Difference in throwing techniques, that is, it is not made on a wheel, it is either handmade or it is made on a mold. So it is something like, I can call it as a handicraft style. So I'm putting it in the within in comma, and rather than an industrial style, because people accept that Harappans had industrial style, and handicraft style is not something which is acceptable to the Harappan scholars. No, why was it overlooked? This is a reason which I said earlier, the desperate search for Harappan sites in the frontier states of India and then Harappan status accreditation. So these are all the things probably which did leave this one unattended. That is one reason. Second thing is that this was probably, since it is a different kind of ceramic tradition, it must have come as a product of a different cultural group. We do not know. And unfortunately, you cannot make a culture out of a ceramic type. What we need to do is that we need to have many other kind of cultural elements to call it as a different kind of culture. That is the problem. And then there was also a confusion due to its nomenclature because it is known as micaceous reddiver. So mica is present there. So what is there in that one? It is, my reddivers are there and mica is present there. Mica is present there as an integral part of the salt. So many people who were reading it and who had not handled the material or who did not have the hands-on experience of this particular ceramic type, they could not realize that this was a separate tradition because iron making or anything of that sort, they could not understand. So when you look at the thin sections of it, this is a thin section of a thin section is actually what I do is that I follow a method which is used by the geologists to study minerals in a rock. So I prepare a thin section, that is, the thickness of the thin section of ceramic is maximum 30 microns. So that is 0.03 millimeter. So, and in that particular phase, you can see what you are seeing is that the pottery is made of clay and sand. There is a lot of sand in that. Sand means minerals. So you try to look at the mineralogy of the sand particles, and then you can use that method for many things. I've been using it for over 40 years. I have used this method for provenance analysis, multiple analysis, which I'm not going to get it here because it is another 2-3 hours lecture. That is a very different kind of field. So the thin sections were prepared. Here what you can see is that these white dots that you are seeing, they are all particles, sand particles. You can, for a layman, I'm just saying, talking as a layman, if you look at this one, there are large particles. So the sand particle size is much larger here. Even in this zone, it is large. Whereas in this zone, it is very, very small, which means that the tradition of preparing the clay paste was different for these two. These two are more or less similar, but whereas this one has an entirely different kind of tradition, which indicates a different workshop or indicates a different tradition. So that is what I'll say. Now, when you look at the kind of material, that mineralogy, and when you try to look at the provenance, you can see three clusters here. So there are three people from this village. They were getting ceramics from three different sources. And I'm not saying that they were making ceramics in those places, because we do not, that was a small settlement. So from three different places, they were getting the ceramics. Of this one, this particular one, that is this micaceous redware, because it was coming from an entirely different area. So that must have been produced in a village which had an entirely different ceramic tradition. Now, if you look at all these things, micaceous redware, it is handmade, molded, or slow boiled. It is burnished, thick, glossy slip all over the vessel, round-bottomed vessel with only one exception, that is then irregular surface. That was a flat one. So all these things, I am defining it as a handicraft style. Whereas here it is wheel-made, multiple techniques are used. Regular shape, sometimes unshaped, variety of shapes and fabrics, good execution of designs mostly simple and rarely complex. So this becomes an industrial side. So we are able to separate out, there are two traditions existing during the Indus Valley period phase in one region, that is Gujarat, basically in Gujarat, because large number of micaceous redware sites are in Gujarat. Now, what are the roots of it? Can we consider it as a separate culture? Because if you go through the diaries of S.R. Rao, and also if you go through the notes that he has published, you can see in certain times, in the beginning stage, he was not willing to accept it. But later he started seeing, because he was also confused. It was for the first time that such a ceramic was coming, because when we were excavating a North Korea site, we excavated for almost 5 years to realize that that site was giving some different type of ceramics. Because unless, maybe one or two manufacturing defects here and there can show up as a separate one. But unless you get large amount of it, you will not know. So Rao had that difficulty. Initial phase, he was not in a position to put it as a separate one. But later he found that it is something like that. And then Professor Subbarao, when he wrote his book, Personality of India, he had proposed that Saurashtra region has a separate kind of, tradition within the Harappan context itself. We called it as Kathiawar Harappans. People ignored it until Gregory Postel came out and said that he did not use the term Kathiawar, he used the term Sorath. Sorath is the ancient name of Saurashtra region. And so there is a separate tradition existing, separate tradition of culture was there. That is a region of Alcholistic culture. And of course, they had links with the Harappan world. And at the same time, they kept their own identity to themselves. So we have supporting arguments as well as refuting arguments. That is one case study. So So here what I was trying to prove, that there are two styles existing. One is a handicraft style. The other one is a industrial style. Now I'm getting into the industrial style, and I'm trying to say that the industrial style of the Harappans is also not as simple as we think. It is very complex. So for that, there is one type of ceramic that I analyzed. This is reserved slipware. It's a very complex kind of ceramic technology. And Mackay, that is Ernest Mackay, who excavated Mohenjo-daro and also who was there as a part of Marshall's team, he called it as glazed reserved slipware. Now, from Mohenjo-daro, there are only 7 sherds of this particular. Throughout its history of excavations, only 7 sherds have been reported. And if you assign the kind of glazing to an Indus Valley ceramics, that takes back the date of the technology of glaze to something around 2500 BC. As on today, we know that it existed somewhere around 1000 BC. But before that, we do not have any. That is in the global context, I'm saying. So it was very exciting to look at it actually, to know whether it is a glaze or not. That is something. I know this particular pottery, this is named after the surface treatment. What they have done is that once the vessel is made, they applied a slip over it, first slip. Then second slip was also applied. Then a part of the upper slip was very carefully removed using a kind of instrument like a comb or something like that. So there you see a contrasting effect. The lower slip is there, and lower slip is the black one, and the upper slip is this one. So you have this contrasting effect. This is known as reserve slipping. And this is not confined to only Indus Valley people. I have seen it in even early historic pottery. I have seen it in other kind of Archaeology cultures also. But this kind of surface sheen, you don't get it in any other kind of pottery. So this is the distribution of the reserve slipware. I'm still using the term glazed here. The glazed reserve slipware in Gujarat and outside Gujarat, it is not much prominent. This particular reserve slipware you will get, but the glazed ones you will not get. So this is how the nomenclature comes, and its vessel forms are dish on style, dish, high net pots, etc. 7 shirts from Mohenjo-daro and mostly confined to Kutch region. Now these are all some of those vessels actually. This is from Junagadh. This is excavated by Kerala University. Dholavira excavated by Archaeological Survey of India. And this drawing was supplied to me by one of my former PhD students, Rajesh, because he was excavating Junagadh and he had all kinds of this material there. So he was compiling it and he sent it to me. Now, there are certain misconceptions about it, because whenever I say that resource repair, people get confused, because first of all, people don't understand what is resource repair. So resource repair is only a surface treatment. It is not a technological term. And it is the non-glazed ones are found in Rajasthan, Haryana, Punjab, and certain regions of Gujarat during the regionalization era. And glazed ones, the so-called glazed ones, are found only in Kutch. So I am including into that particular one, the glazed ones. Now this is a different. The non-glazed varieties are like this. The research slippers that you find in the early Harappan levels, Pontipipuli and all. Whereas you have the glazed variety, the so-called glazed variety here, you have it in different colors and all. Now, if you look at the history of its research, this is a kind of assumptions that were made. First, Plunderley, a conservator from British Museum, he looked at it and he found that there are some kind of powdered slag is there, and that is what is giving it this black color. Then Ernest Mackay looked at it and he said that it is a glaze. The pale coat is a glaze. Dilip Chakravarti, who is not a scientist, but his observation was very interesting. He said that accidental fusion of particles, that is what is giving it a surface shade. And I started working on it in 1986. And my first article was published in 2005. It took almost 20 years for completing that work. So I observed sintering on the surface coat and high amount of iron oxide on black coat. The issue was my article was not getting published because they wanted more and more proof, and they wanted me to collaborate with more people and to confirm the kind of observations that I made. So this is how it looks like. This is the black area and this is the gray area. Here this is the core part. And you can see there is something called intermittent state of vitrification. Vitrification is a step ahead of sintering. Sintering is a kind of fusion. From there, once you go, it becomes much harder and all those things. So but it is not fully vitrified, but it is slightly intermittent state. And these white patches you are seeing here in this one, they are all iron oxide particles. So that is why it is iron oxide in that reduced form. That is why they are dark. But whereas here it is a pale one and the amount of iron oxide is very, very small. This is the chemical composition, and I did this is energy dispersive X-ray analysis. And there is always a belief that manganese oxide, presence of manganese oxide can give the black color. So I was trying to check whether manganese oxide has given some kind of color. The amount of manganese oxide present there is very, very small. Iron oxide can give black color if it is in the ferrous state, that is in the reduced state. But if this is in the reduced state, the whole port should be black in color. But only that area is black. So what exactly is the mechanism there? That is what we were trying to do. That slide I will come in the end, okay? So then what happens is that this is how, try to plot. This is silicon dioxide versus alumina and also potash versus alumina. Try to plot it. And when I tried to plot it, I found that these are all the different clusters coming. The black slip area is the black triangle and the pale slip is the colorless triangle and the body part is this. So this is how it was getting scattered. Now, we noticed another very interesting thing. This one, they were falling in one group and this one was falling different. So, interestingly, what it means is that there are two different sources or two different centers of production. Probably, okay, let us consider that two different centers of production. So this is indicative of one center of production, whereas this is indicative of the other center of production. And the material of this one and this one, they belong to the same shirt, whereas this one belonged to the different one. So it was more or less certain that two different production centers were there. What the investigation has to be done on that line. So before that, I wanted to tell what exactly are the coloring material. So this is identified, the glazed, it is not glazing, it is sintering. Sintering means two crystals, when they are close to each other, when you are heating it to a high temperature, they grow. Grow means, that is a decent way of saying, actually what is happening is that they melt and they become one. But in science, they say that it is crystal growth, something like that. So that is it. Second thing is that the slip that was used, the process is known as illitration. Means the refining of the clay is done through a process called illitration. It's like just you take a tub of water and put clay in it and agitate it. So what you will find is that the heavier particles will subside first and the supernatant liquid will have very fine particles of clay. It will have very fine grains of sand also. So that process is known as illitration. So that illitration resulted in getting that fineness to the clay. And there was an element called mullite in that one. Mullite is actually kielinite, the clay mineral called kielinite. When you heat it, it undergoes a change and it becomes something called mullite. And the kielinite breaks down somewhere around 556 degrees Celsius. And then there is a state which is not crystallographically, we are not able to see it there. So we call it as metakielinate. Then comes the mullite. And so mullite means, the presence of mullite means, it indicates that this kind of thing can be formed only at this particular temperature. So it requires somewhere around 1000 degrees Celsius. And creating 1000 degrees Celsius in a kiln is not that easy during the Indus Valley period. That is 2500 years BC or 4500 years before present. That requires a very special kind of technology. Then also looked at the black color, what exactly is giving black. We initially thought it is iron oxide, but then when we did that X-ray diffraction using the Debasher camera method, we came to know that it is hercinate, that is iron, alumina. These are a combination of that. That is, hercinate is the material that is giving the color, and probably it was fired in a reducing condition. And it's very special type of kilns, because to achieve this temperature is it's not that easy. So all these things indicated that the potter who made it may have been an extremely skillful potter. So I call it him as a specialist potter. Specialization in potting tradition is there, but the potters who are highly specialized in the specialized potting community, they can be called as specialist potter. So then verify why if there are more number of sources. Pagasra is one of the sites excavated by the MS University. 1.92 hectares is the size. Then this is how the excavation, after the excavation, we have the fortification here and different prestige. This is a shell workshop, this is fines workshop. These are all different activity areas, like the shell working area, the fines working. In the morning I was telling about the activity area, the same kind of activity areas, bead workshops and also the pottery bakery. So there is each activity areas are confined to certain places, and this is the sequence, the stratigraphy. There is early urban and post-urban. This is how that phase 1, phase 2, and these are all the relative chronology of it. Then another site is Shikarpur, which was excavated by the department, and this is some of those trenches. And when this is a plan of Shikarpur, fortification and all, and this is a sequence actually. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 1 is phase 2 urban, and phase 3 is post-urban. So, and these are all the cultural affiliations. Now, the kind of sinter resource report that was coming from there, it had different kinds. Well, black and grey slip pots, then red and white slipped ones, then red and black slipped ones, brown and cream slip, and purple and cream slip. So, it has a different kind of color combination. So, which means that there may have been different ceramic workshops which were doing it. It was not just one workshop that was coming out of it, because there are varieties coming in this sort. Because why am I saying is that the potters have a very strange tradition of confining their activities to only one particular kind of raw material, because they are not comfortable with a variety of materials. Like I had done a lot of ethnographic studies among the potters, and I found that there is a potter in Baroda who hails from Mathura region. Even at the age of 80, he was getting clay from Mathura, and he was working only on it. If you had given him Baroda clay, he would fail to make a pestle, because they are not comfortable. They're tradition-bound people, and their hands are like that, made like that actually. So these were tested. Actually, then the 2 sites were taken, and I just wanted to see if there are more than one production center. That was the primary objective. Different kinds of analysis were done. Apparent porosity was, this is the apparent porosity graph from Bagasra, this is from Shikarpur, and it said that it is more or less the same. So that particular property, it was not encouraging or making me believe that there are more than one production centers. And also this kind of statistical analysis also was not that. Then we did around 263 samples were studied for this particular tree. It was not easy. It took almost 1.5 years to do it. So thin sections of that, doing the insection of 263 sample is a hell of a lot of work actually, because you have to get it ready and you have to keep looking at it, and your power of the glass keeps on increasing, and you develop a hunchback because you are sitting always like this microscope, develop a lot of pain around the shoulder and all. So this is, then they were grouped into different, this grouping is done based on the composition, the mineralogical composition, and also the texture. These are all the 2 things that I have taken into consideration to do it. So this is a mineralogical composition, and this is of different groups, and this is the textural composite, very silt, very fine sand, medium sand, coarse sand, very coarse sand. What are the kind of sand divisions in that? Then the difference between the color variations, actually we didn't find much difference actually. That is unfortunate. Then try to see whether this group means, does it mean to one provenance, or does it belong to a kind of a workshop, or does it belong to something else? But we found that similarly, group A materials, the groups, the ceramics which were falling in our group A, Bagasra materials Shikarpur materials, we had from both, Group B also. So it doesn't mean that, okay, this center was supplied materials from this area or that center was supplied from this area. So wherever the production was taking place, they were supplying to both the places. That is how it is. So intra-site variation, within the variation, if there is any kind of difference in the distribution of this material, that is another thing that we try to see. And this is not much important here. And some of the general observations that the coarser resource repair, there are two categories you can say. One is the finer one, the other one is the coarser one. Coarser one was mostly from Shikarpur, that is the entrance to Kutch, whereas Bagasra is slightly before entering Kutch, that is near Morbi area. This is then Shikarpur, the resource repair appears within and outside the fortification, whereas they appear within the fortification by most of the grain. So the distribution pattern, that is not going to be used here. This particular observation is not going to be used here because that is meant for some other kind of work. Then also we notice some kind of fluctuation, that is the plain matrix ratio. So what is the proportion between the sand and the clay? That was something which we were trying to see. So 1:2.13 and 1:2.66. There is some kind of consistency here. But then there is a major fluctuation here. This may be a failed attempt or somebody who was trying to learn the method, probably making an apprentice or somebody of that sort. It may suggest or it may indicate of such a product. Then the propositions that I brought out, that resource repair is a product, it is actually a socio-economic competition among the societies. That is what that brings out, or that is what is reflected in the different qualities of the ceramics here. So it is very easy, we could conclude that, okay, it is a socio-economic competition within society and outside of it. That was why this entire resource repair was produced. And there are more than one workshop or workshop complexes at each site. And it's just very standardized and specialized method of production by specialist potters, because not every potter can do it, because it requires a lot of knowledge of the raw material and selection of a specific raw material, control firing, and also you should have a kiln, should be in a position to equip a kiln which can go to a very high temperature. Then it is something, the monopoly of the Kutch settlements, like they don't have any patent or anything like that during the Indus-Saraswati period, but this product can be equated with that, like a product of the Indus patent product. Then it has probably enhanced the economy of Kutch settlements through its production, and this is quite visible in the places like Dolavira and all. Dolavira had lot of transactions between Dolavira and Harappa and between Dolavira and Mohenjo-daro, but you do not see this kind of special kind of materials there. You only see those pillar members and architectural members, the pillar bases and all those things going from Dolavira. Now I'm getting this, the last part of my lecture, I'm getting into a more complicated analysis of looking at the composition of the pigment. So the first one was a handicraft technology, and the second one was a very sophisticated industrial kind of technology. Here it is a more complex kind of industrial technology. This is it's a Harappan, they call it as S-profile jar, because the person who looked at it, he thought that it looks like S, this profile is S. So we have to give a nomenclature to it, and they call it as S-profile jar. It's primarily a red ware, that is a red vessel, and which has lot of paintings, black paintings. So what is this black paintings? Earlier it was thought that it is manganese or something entirely different. So try to analyze it. And interestingly, what I found is that this is EDAX, this is one sample, and there, you have manganese is very small in quantity, iron is present here. And whereas in this case, there is manganese small again, iron here. So it is primarily iron is giving the color. Of course, I had no problem. Iron can give color. Iron can give a red color if it is a ferric oxide. and can give black color if it is ferrous oxide. But how is it possible to have these two colors on the same vessel using iron? That was a kind of inquiry. It's not very easy to explain that. So what I did is then I did the SEM, scanning electron microscopy. First, it is at a very fairly high magnification. You can see this is it. And here, look at the number of pores available here. Number of pores here. The pores are more here, whereas the pores are less here. So what has happened is that sintering has led to seeding of that whole egg. Now, try to look at the vessels of the Indus Valley period, and I try to make an explanation for it. See, once the vessel is prepared, and you have very finely navigated clay, and pigment part, the colorant is mixed with that, and it is applied on the surface. Then it is kept for baking, and this is a kind of chamber. This we experimented it in Baroda. The last experiment that I did was I had conducted a workshop. For about 2 weeks, we had a workshop in Baroda, and we managed to bring it out. We managed to get this one, this multiple coloring in that one. So in such kind of chamber, baking kiln, it has two chambers. This is a fire chamber. This is a baking chamber. And these two are separated by a perforated plate. And here there is a kind of some pedestal like thing which is supporting this so that it does not go. Now what is happening is that the vessels are kept here and the fire is put from here. It is a closed one. There is a wall here. So you keep the wall open and put fire here, and there will be a regular draft of air that will be maintained. So it is an oxidizing environment. The whole pot is red in that color at that time. So it reaches the peak temperature. The material that you are adding here is, okay, you are adding dry heaves, you are also putting dry pushes, you are putting cow dung cakes and all those things. When it is in the top temperature, you close the wall to stop the firing. But at that time also, there is still burning process taking place inside. And that burning process is taking place in the inadequate supply of oxygen. That generates a reducing environment, as a result of which the whole vessel turns dark in color. And then once the fire is over, the firing baking is over, they open this wall, and if it is an open fire baking, they open the walls to allow the air to get in for the cooling. So at that time what happens is that since this painted area, this paint is mixed with very fine, extremely navigated clay, it must have closed the pores. So the ferrous oxide that was formed here, that is now having a sealing on the surface of it. So it stays as dark. The other areas where, it is porous, the ferrous oxide gets converted into ferric oxide. So you have in one go, they were able to make black color as well as red color in the same vessel. Of course, that is industrial happens only they have to wait actually. So then these are the future general prospects of this kind of ceramic analysis and all. I am only giving just one or two case studies of what I have done in my whole career. And I'm coming out with a book which will have almost all these things in that one. I've done more than around 50,000 thin sections and also done a lot of analysis of ceramics from different parts of the world. Sri Lanka, India, Nepal, Pakistan, then Jordan, and also I have analyzed some Greek ceramics and all. So a lot of things are there. So I found that these are some of those general prospects from technology, from this materials. You have to come to archaeology and you have to say something about the culture, because basically you have to say that the role of culture or role of this technology within the culture, that is how it should be there. So I'm demonstrating. I think I was successful in telling you that there are two types, Indus-Saraswati as well as Handicraft. Thank you very much.